Hello, everybody. It's your boy, the Punk with Talk Stripe, and welcome to the Batman Cape Crusader finale review, episodes 9 and 10. Now, this is a two-parter, so I'm gonna kind of talk about it as if it were one episode. One episode was definitely better than the other, and I'll get to why later on in the video, but I'm gonna talk about them as if they were one episode, because the stories do connect very much so. And there was something at the very end here that I have a bone to pick with. And because the show has been out a little over a week, you have either one, or have already heard about it, or two, because the show has been out for a little over a week now, I feel like I can spoil it and it's not really that much of an issue now. But once I start to get to it, if it's something that you have no idea what it is and you don't want it spoiled for you, I will give a warning right before I talk about it. But it's something I have to get off my chest because it was one of the things that really kind of deflated, not completely, but kind of deflated the high I was running on for this show. Because I just thought to myself, man, you're much better than that. But we'll get to that later. For right now, let's talk about the finale at hand. The finale of Batman Cape Crusader. So, the last episode ended with Harvey Dent being brutally assaulted with acid being thrown in his face. And these episodes, or at least the first of them, of course, is the aftermath of that. Harvey Dent has pulled out of the mayoral race, and he's now no longer DA either. And he feels very disgraced. He feels very fallen down. He's, of course, feels he's at rock bottom. And who wouldn't after something like that? He just went through a traumatic experience. With this assault also comes mental anguish and trauma, and it starts to make him spiral down mentally because he's traumatized. Something inside of him has been brought out, and he's using it to lash out at the world because he's so angry. And he makes a final decision that if the justice that he fought so hard for isn't going to work, he's going to deal out his own and get revenge on those that did this to him. Now, of course, this is a story with Two-Face that we have seen before, and I feel like this handled it just fine, but I had one big problem with it, and it was that it didn't feel as tragic as other Harvey Dent stories like this have had. To me, this was handled the same way that it was handled at the end of The Dark Knight, where it was tacked on, it was handled very quickly, and kind of unsatisfying at the end of it all. Now, don't get me wrong, Harvey Dent and Diedrich Bader's performance as him was very good, but it just didn't have that punch to it. It just wasn't as tragic because we haven't really had that much time with him up until now. I mentioned before, there's a lot of him in the beginning. In the first few episodes, it's established he's running for mayor. He's established, of course, that he's the DA, and then at the end of his appearance, up until we see him in episode 8, he ends it by giving his campaign financially to a mob boss, Robert Thorne, and then we don't really see him after that until episode 8, where that all kind of comes to a head. And because of that, I felt like they tried really hard to make us feel for Harvey Dent more so than we should have. Of course, what he went through is completely horrifying, and we should feel bad for anyone that goes through that. But in a narrative sense, I didn't really feel like there was as much tragedy as they wanted me to believe that there was. And I felt like, in that sense, it was very, very underwritten. And it kind of disappointed me. But in the actual actions and content of what Harvey Dent does, I thought it was really cool. He goes and he raids the mob boss's house and kills all of his men. He's pulling off these acts of brutal vengeance. And it's on par with everything that this show has had so far in terms of its disturbing creep factor. I understood his plight. I understood why he was doing it, and felt bad for him in that sense. But I just felt like there should have been more. We should have been with this character a lot longer. And to be honest, even beforehand, he was kind of what's the friendly way to say this? He was already kind of a jerk, right? He wasn't a bad dude, but he was kind of a jerk. He was a little unlikable. He had that to him. So that combined with the fact that we didn't spend much time with him, we didn't really see much redeeming about him. What is really there to feel sorry for? It kind of seems like he's the kind of guy that would have gone down this path anyway if, say, something didn't go his way. So yeah, man, I don't know. I feel like this could have been handled with a lot more care, and with the way it ends, I don't think we're gonna see any more of the story. I don't know, man. It was kind of lame. So episode 10 centers around keeping Harvey Dent safe from the criminal organization that has been funding his campaign. Because at this point, the cat's out of the bag. They know who did this to Harvey Dent, and it's all a matter of just getting them put away for the crimes that they've committed in terms of election fraud and, of course, the assault on Harvey Dent and just basically everything else that they've done. And the episode doesn't really get that exciting up until the 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 segment at the pier where all the characters are gathered. Batman is fighting off these criminals, and Harvey Dent is, trying to be who he was before, but also trying to enact his own revenge. And of course, near the end, he gets his own redemption. But it all just didn't come together for me. The tragedy of Harvey Dent comes from the fact that he was the guy that was going to save Gotham. He was going to clean it up, essentially. He was Gotham's golden boy. He was more of the hero than Batman even was. And that's where the tragedy comes from. That the fact that this happened and he has such a downfall from grace and becomes Two Face. But that wasn't there. And when what happens to him, it's a little disheartening. It's sad, but kind of like what I mentioned with Jim Gordon, right? When I mentioned that if Jim Gordon had been successfully eliminated, I would have felt like, oh, that's sad, but okay, what else is going on? That's kind of how I felt here with what happened to Harvey Dent. Uh, they try to give him a redemption, and it kind of works, I guess, but it also kind of doesn't. Um, I don't know. I was kind of underwhelmed by this finale. I love the whole show, and even I would give these episodes maybe like an 8 out of 10 each, maybe even a 7 out of 10 each, but I wanted more out of them. And I felt like the show didn't end to its full potential up to that point. But there was one thing that I really liked about this show that they did in two episodes. One was in the last episode, and one was in the first episode, and it's that the heroes don't always win. In the first episode, Penguin actually enacts what she's trying to do. Batman stops it as best as he can, but she pulls it off, and he admits at the very end, "We lost," and that's kind of what happens here too. Robert Thorne gets away with it, and Batman lets him know, "Hey, I know you got away with it, but I'm still on you." You've probably seen that image of Batman standing on the building with the lightning behind him, kind of emulating the animated series. That's the moment where he's standing across from Robert Thorne on another building, and it's him telling him, "I'm still here, and I'm still going to be watching you. You got away with it this time. You won't again." And I thought that was really great, but it was still the idea of that these heroes lost and that these criminals, these villains in this show do have the upper hand sometimes. And I think that that's important. It's important that we have shows that give us heroes that lose because then they can overcome that later. And I think that's what season 2 is going to have. Now, I'm done talking about the finale in general because there's a lot about it that I think you should just experience on your own. But I just want to give my initial thoughts on it, and those were it. But speaking of season 2, I'm now going to get into the spoilery thing that I mentioned before. So if you haven't seen the show yet, if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you don't want to know what I'm talking about, I'm about to give a huge, huge spoiler. So I'm giving you time to click away now. And for those of you that stay, I'll see you in the next clip. Okay, so for those of you that stayed, that shot of Batman at the end with him standing on the building and leering at Robert Thorne, that should have been the last shot of the show, but it wasn't. They decided they wanted to give us one more thing, and even if the one more thing they gave was cool, I still would have thought, that shot of Batman at the end, you could have just done with that as the final shot. Anyway, they cut away from that, and they go and cut to a shot of a shed. And in the shed, you hear this maniacal laughter. And when you cut to this point, to the inside of the shed, you see these people tied to chairs, all grayed out with big, horrifying grins on their faces. And you cut to one man, and he's still hysterically laughing. It looks like it pains him, and I'm sure you can already tell where this is going. But he laughs until he passes, and then we cut to eyes like this with a white face, and you hear a voice say, "Perfect." And you already know what it is. It's the Joker. They're teasing the Joker. And I couldn't help but just heave a big sigh of disappointment. Look, I was going to say this in the Harley Quinn episode before I knew that this was going to happen, because I wanted to make a point about how much Harley was her own character in this. But I don't I didn't want the Joker in this show. I don't want him in this show at all. If you had to put him in here, I guess you could have just waited a bit longer. But overall, I just didn't want him in this show. He's overused. I like the Joker a lot. I really love the Joker. He's not just my favorite Batman villain. He's probably one of my favorite characters, period, in comic books. But he's just everywhere now, and he's actually so everywhere. He's to the point of just oversaturation, kind of like Batman. People would argue that about Batman, and I can kind of see that. It's sort of the Batman syndrome. He's in everything. He's everywhere, and it's a shame because there's so many other Batman villains, and it was good that this show, as its first season, highlighted some of those more obscure villains, but now they're going to have the Joker in future seasons, and he's just going to overshadow everything. Look, the Joker isn't interesting as an end stinger anymore. He's just not, because he's been in everything. He's been in our conscious. So when you make him an end stinger, it doesn't give you the ooh feeling or the moment, because it's the Joker. We've seen the Joker. He was just in the DCEU with Jared Leto. Then immediately after Jared Leto, Joaquin Phoenix was the Joker. And then at the end of the Robert Pattinson movie, they teased him, and they did a deleted scene of Batman interrogating the Joker, and he's in the Harley Quinn animated show. He's everywhere. The Joker is everywhere. And when a character is everywhere, it doesn't make them an interesting tease, because we already know that they're gonna show up eventually. And that was my takeaway from that too when I first saw that. I was like, well, of course so. But me being naive thought this show was good enough to just not go there. And it wasn't. But I guess we'll see what they do with him. I'll probably end up liking what they do with him anyway, but I just really felt like this season being capped off with a teaser to the Joker was just lame and unneeded. And how they portrayed or how they handled leading up to Two Face was also just lame and mishandled. I would still consider this my favorite show of the year, just because the problems I had with it are kind of light problems or even nitpicks. But man, it didn't end with the bang like I wanted it to, and it certainly didn't give me the teaser I thought I would have. I don't know, man. But I'm looking forward to season 2 regardless. And those are my thoughts on the finale of Batman Cape Crusader. And I ask you again, one last time, have you been watching the show? If you have, what do you think about it? Are you gonna look forward to season 2? Are you gonna watch season 2? And moreover, once you watch the show, if you have been here long enough to see the spoiler or already been seeing the show and already know what I'm talking about, um, what do you think about the Joker being in the show? Do you think I'm completely wrong? Do you think that the Joker being involved is just always welcome? Or do you agree with me? Do you agree that because he's just in so much Batman media, that him being a little tease isn't really that interesting anymore? Let me know down in the comments. Let's talk everything Batman, DC Comics, and superheroes down there. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.